You have dreams, ambitious plans, an extraordinary future that you visualize clearly when you lay your head on the pillow at night. Perhaps you imagine a big project being completed, a stronger, richer, more respected version of yourself, finally recognized. You see yourself achieving everything that today seems unattainable, and for a few moments, you believe that this time will be different, that now it will happen, that you will make it happen. But the days go by, the weeks pile up, and before you know it, you are in the same place as before. With the same excuses, the same fears, the same emptiness hidden by cheap distractions. The project that excited you is abandoned. The goals that ignited you are forgotten, and that future you has become just another frustrated fantasy. And then comes the cruel thought, maybe I just don't have enough discipline. Maybe I don't deserve it. Maybe I will never succeed. But what if the problem is deeper? What if the reason your dreams never come true has nothing to do with discipline, focus, or luck? What if, in fact, there is a part of you that is actively sabotaging everything? A hidden, unconscious part that works against every attempt you make to move forward. And worse, does this believing it is protecting you? Carl Jung called this force the shadow. And if you do not confront this hidden part, your dreams will continue to die before they are even born. Not because of the world, not due to lack of ability, but because there is an invisible war happening inside you. And you are losing this war because you don't even know it exists. Jung said that as long as you do not make conscious what is unconscious, it will control your life, and you will call it fate. It is not fate. It is self-sabotage, sophisticated, disguised, and deeply rooted in your psyche. The brutal truth is, you do not fail because you are weak. You fail because, at some unconscious level, you are afraid of what will happen if you win. Afraid of being seen. Afraid of being rejected. Afraid of discovering that you are not as great as you dream. Or worse, afraid of discovering that you are indeed great, and that this will separate you from everything you know. In this video, you will understand why your dreams do not come true, and how to confront the true enemy, yourself. If you are tired of starting and stopping, if you feel that there is something deeper pulling you back every time you try to move forward, this video is your mirror. But be careful, what you will see here may change everything. Because once you see your shadow, you can no longer pretend it is not there. Are you ready? Then take a deep breath and come with me, because now, the fight is against yourself. The greatest illusion you carry is believing that you are only what you know of yourself. What you show to the world, what you control, what you proudly call I. But what you call I is just the surface, the tip of the iceberg. Below that, hidden, lies a vast and dark territory that you have learned to ignore, and it is precisely there that the true root of your self-sabotage resides. Carl Jung called this territory the shadow, the unconscious part of your psyche where all the aspects of you that have been rejected, denied, or repressed throughout life are stored. Anger, envy, ambition, desire for power, selfish impulses, unresolved traumas, shame, fear, but also courage, leadership, greatness, genius. Everything that has not been accepted or understood, you have hidden in the shadow, and the more you try to ignore it, the more it acts in the shadows, silently shaping your thoughts, sabotaging your choices, undermining your dreams. From an early age, you were conditioned to repress essential parts of yourself. If you were punished for wanting to be the center of attention, you learned to hide. If you were told that ambition was selfishness, you learned to self-sabotage. If shining meant being rejected, you learned to fail as a form of protection. The shadow is not evil. It is protective. but it is a blind guardian. It acts based on the past, not the present. It protects you from dangers that no longer exist, with mechanisms that today only paralyze you. That is why you dream big, but live small. Because the conscious part wants to move forward, while the shadow pulls you back, and it will always be stronger as long as it remains unconscious. You may even try hard. Set goals, watch motivational videos, create planners, make checklists, repeat positive affirmations. But if inside you there is a part that associates success with exposure, visibility with risk, achievement with abandonment, you will find a way to fail. And the most perverse part? You will rationalize that failure. You will say it wasn't the right time, that you lacked time, that an unforeseen event came up. You will convince yourself that the problem is external, when the enemy has always been within. And this enemy is not your enemy out of malice. It is your enemy because it is trying to protect you from something you no longer even remember fearing. That is why Jung stated that the encounter with the shadow is the first step of the individuation journey, the process of becoming who you truly are. You will not achieve your dreams if you continue to fight against an enemy you cannot see. But now that you know it exists, the question is inevitable. How exactly does this shadow act? How does it sabotage your projects without you realizing? How does it manipulate you into abandoning everything whenever you're about to move forward? This is what we will reveal now. And when you see the patterns, you will never be able to ignore them again. If this content is making sense to you, click the subscribe button and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for your support. Have you ever stopped to think about how many times you were close to something important and simply let it slip away? It wasn't a lack of intelligence, nor of capability. You knew what needed to be done. You understood the value of what was at stake. And yet, you procrastinated. You forgot. You self-sabotaged. And then, you rationalized everything with pretty speeches. It wasn't meant to be. I'm not ready. Maybe in the future. But deep down, something in you knows the truth. This has happened before. Carl Jung said that the shadow does not act randomly. It manifests through predictable and repetitive patterns, like a hidden script that you follow without realizing. These patterns are how the shadow protects you, sabotaging your evolution, your exposure, your growth. And the closer you get to a breakthrough, the stronger it reacts. Now let's expose 4 of these hidden mechanisms. And as you listen, pay attention. If one of them hurts, it's because it's active within you. 1. Fear of visibility. You say you want to grow, stand out, be recognized. But the moment you start to gain attention, something inside you locks up. You lose your rhythm. You avoid showing up. You disappear from social media. You postpone launches. And you don't understand why. The truth is that your shadow associates being seen with danger. Perhaps in childhood, being noticed meant being criticized, attacked, or humiliated. So now, every time your dream requires visibility, your psyche activates the defense. Disappear to survive. 2. Guilt for outshining others. If you come from an environment where no one around you achieved great things, where success was rare or viewed with suspicion, then achieving something grand activates a silent guilt. If I win, I'll leave them behind. You may not consciously realize it, but your shadow believes that fulfilling your dreams would be a form of betrayal to your original group. So, to maintain an unconscious loyalty, you self-sabotage. 3. Attachment to the identity of unrealized potential. There are people who have built their identity around being promising. They are that smart person who never had the opportunity, or the misunderstood genius. And achieving something concrete would put an end to that narrative. Because the dream, once realized, ceases to be a myth and becomes reality, with limits, mistakes, and criticism. The shadow then prevents you from acting because it prefers the fantasy of greatness to the reality of an imperfect achievement. 4. Fear of discovering your true limits. As long as you don't truly try, you can believe that you would be amazing, if I wanted to. You live in the illusion that you are brilliant, just waiting for the right moment. But truly trying requires facing a devastating fear. What if I discover that I'm just good? Or worse, mediocre? The shadow prefers to keep the fantasy intact rather than risk confronting the truth. These patterns are not personality flaws, they are survival strategies. Psychic defenses against something that, at some point in your life, was perceived as a threat. But now that you are beginning to recognize these patterns, the next step is inevitable. Where did they come from? When did your mind learn that success was dangerous, that shining meant punishment, that growing was being a traitor? In the next chapter, we will unearth the origin of your shadow. And when you see where it comes from, it loses much of its power. And that's where the real process begins. The shadow does not arise from chance. It is shaped, created, programmed, like a part of your psyche that learned, even in childhood, that certain impulses, emotions, or qualities were too dangerous to be expressed, and so they were banished to the unconscious. Carl Jung saw the shadow as a mechanism of adaptation to the psychic reality of childhood. When you were small, you had no resources to question your environment. If crying caused rejection, you repressed sadness. If being ambitious brought punishment, you buried your will. If standing out made others pull away, you learned to hide. Not because it was wrong to feel, but because at that moment, in that environment, it was dangerous. And a child's mind does whatever it takes to maintain the bond, even if it costs your truth. Therefore, the first real step to deactivate your sabotaging shadow is to ask the question that few have the courage to face. When was the first time I learned that being myself was dangerous? This seemingly simple question has the power to open old wounds, but also to disarm mechanisms that have trapped you for years. Perhaps you were the talented child who was diminished because you overshadowed others. Perhaps you were the child who learned that you were only loved if you didn't disturb, if you didn't demand, if you didn't take up space. Or maybe you saw your father being punished for trying something great, and your unconscious decided that trying equals failing. Jung believed that the shadow is made of these unprocessed memories, subtle traumas, invisible conditioning, and the cruelest part? Often, you don't even consciously remember, because your psyche buried the memory to protect you. But the pattern continues. You still procrastinate, you still sabotage, you still retreat, because somewhere inside you, there is a part that still believes it is in the past, that believes growing up is dangerous, that being ambitious is selfish, that standing out is isolating. By tracing the origin of your shadow, you begin to distinguish what was true then from what is true now. And that breaks the spell. You start to realize, I am no longer that vulnerable child. Today, you can protect yourself. Today, you can express yourself. Today, you can rewrite the story. But identifying the origin is just the beginning. Now that you know why your shadow exists, it's time to listen to it. Because Jung said, the shadow is not just a concept. It has a voice, and that voice needs to be heard. In the next part, we will delve into one of the most powerful practices of Jungian thought. Direct dialogue with your shadow, not as an enemy, but as a guardian of forgotten truths. And when it speaks, you will never be the same again. You can spend your whole life running from something that lives inside you, but Jung teaches us something that most don't want to hear. The only way out is through. After recognizing the patterns and tracing their origin, you are faced with the most challenging and transformative stage of the process. Looking into the eyes of your shadow and listening to what it has to say. Jung called this active imagination, a deep therapeutic method that involves creating an internal space where you can consciously interact with the figures of the unconscious. And among all these figures, the shadow is the most critical. But be careful, you are not doing an intellectual exercise. This is not about thinking about the shadow. It's about giving it form, giving it a face, giving it a voice. It's about finding it, not in books, but within yourself. Close your eyes, take a deep breath. Imagine yourself in a symbolic space, a dark room, a forest, an abyss, and invite your shadow to manifest. It may appear as a human figure, a monster, a corrupted version of yourself, or something completely unexpected. When it appears, do not fight. Look into its eyes and ask, "Why are you stopping me from realizing my dreams? What are you trying to protect me from? What are you afraid of?" And then, listen. Listen without judging, without interrupting, without trying to correct. Let it speak. What usually emerges in that moment is revealing. Your shadow may say, "I'm stopping you from growing because when you tried to be yourself, you were punished. I'm afraid that if you are seen, you will be destroyed, like last time. I'm protecting you from failure, because truly failing is worse than not trying." And in that instant, something powerful happens. You cease to be a victim of invisible internal forces and become a conscious mediator of your psyche. You take on the role of an adult, of an integrated self, of the commander of your own soul. Jung saw this process as a sacred ritual, the ego dialoguing with the unconscious, not to destroy the shadow, but to integrate it. You recognize that it acted out of protection, and you can now propose a new agreement. You say, "Thank you for protecting me, but now I can take care of myself. I am an adult now. I can be seen and still survive." This dialogue is not done just once. It is a practice, a relationship that builds over time. But with each new conversation, the shadow becomes less of a saboteur and more of an ally. And the energy that was once used to block your dreams begins, little by little, to be released to realize them. But this process is only complete when you take the next step, reclaiming from the shadow the qualities you buried along with the fears. Because the shadow does not only carry traumas, it also holds the powers you were conditioned to deny. And now that you have learned to listen to it, it's time to reclaim what is rightfully yours. In the next part, we will explore the forbidden qualities that your shadow protects, and how integrating them may be the key to unlocking the life you have always dreamed of living. If what you're hearing resonates with you, you'll find real value in my ebooks. Beyond the Shadow breaks down Jung's core ideas, while Dialogues with the Unconscious gives you a 30-day path to apply them in your life. Both are linked in the pinned comment. You have been taught to fear certain parts of yourself, and the most tragic part? Many of these parts are exactly what you need the most to succeed. The shadow does not only store shame, pain, and trauma, it also holds your repressed power, strength, ambition, creative fury, authority, the ability to say no, the ability to say, "I deserve." These qualities have been exiled because, at some point in your upbringing, they were misinterpreted by you or by those around you. If you were called selfish for setting boundaries, you may have buried your assertiveness. If you were told you were arrogant for believing in yourself, you may have learned to silence yourself. If shining made you lose love or connection, you may have concluded that being great is being dangerous. But Jung was clear. What you reject in yourself does not disappear. It only transforms into an obstacle. And as long as you do not integrate these shadow qualities, they will continue to act dysfunctionally as self-sabotage, procrastination, emotional outbursts, or paralysis. It is time to take a brutally honest inventory. Ask yourself, what qualities do I judge in others but secretly admire? What bothers me about successful people? What do I believe I cannot be to continue being accepted? Perhaps you need to reclaim the aggression that turned into passivity. Perhaps what you call humility is actually a fear of taking a stand. Perhaps what you learned to call kindness is just an addiction to pleasing to survive. Now list those qualities you have repressed. See how they appear in others, and how you condemn them. Then, reinterpret. Give them new names. Reframe. Selfishness can be self-care. Arrogance can be self-assertion. Coldness can be emotional intelligence. Insensitivity can be strategic discernment. Ambition can be fidelity to your purpose. When you reclaim these qualities, you begin to operate more fully. You stop being half of yourself, trying to be nice, safe, and accepted, and become a whole human being, with light and shadow integrated, capable of acting with truth. And here is the most important point. Integrating is not about forcing these qualities to perform. It is about assuming their energy with awareness and responsibility. It is deciding that you can be firm without being cruel, visible without being arrogant, ambitious without being predatory. But the shadow, even after being recognized, may still resist. That is why Jung suggested we do something powerful, make a pact with it. A negotiation between the conscious ego and the sabotaging unconscious, like an internal peace treaty. And that is what we will do in the next part. You will write your own contract with the shadow, acknowledging its protective function, but finally taking the lead in your life. Because only when you honor the fear of the shadow does it begin to clear the way. You spent your life trying to overcome yourself, battling impulses, sabotages, and fears you couldn't explain. But now, after recognizing your shadow, understanding your patterns, tracing their origins, and listening to it, you have the opportunity to do what Jung called a conscious pact with the unconscious. No longer as enemies, but as allies. The shadow will not simply disappear because you understood its functioning. It was created to protect you. And as long as you don't feel safe, it will continue to activate the same mechanisms that keep you in the cycle of frustration. That's why you need to make a deal with it. A shadow contract. This contract is not a mystical fantasy. It is a conscious declaration, a commitment between you, the adult, conscious and responsible part, and that archaic, wounded and defensive part that still lives in your nervous system. And it begins with recognition. You write, "Shadow, I acknowledge that you protect me when..." Describe the specific pattern. "I understand that you do this because you are afraid of..." Describe the real, ancestral, primitive fear. Then, you thank it. "Thank you for trying to keep me safe. You did the best you could with the resources you had. Thanks to you, I survived." And then comes the request for change. "Now, I am an adult. I have resources I didn't have before. I can protect myself. Therefore, I ask you to allow me to..." Describe the dream, the project, the step you wish to take. And finally, you offer something in return. Not as a bargain, but as care for what the shadow fears most. In return, I commit to describe an emotional self-care practice that reduces risk to the system. For example, I promise to protect my boundaries clearly. I promise to embrace my emotions without judgment. I promise not to expose myself unprepared and not to seek external approval as an addiction. Sign this contract. Read it aloud. Reread it every day, especially in moments when you notice sabotage returning. This contract is a transition ritual, a powerful symbolic act where you make it clear who is in charge now is you. But know that this is not the end of the journey. The integration of the shadow is a continuous process, and the next step is as important as the previous ones. So, if this video awakened something in you, if it made you remember patterns, fears, or abandoned dreams, leave in the comments, "I see my shadow, and I am ready to negotiate." Write, declare, share, and keep watching the next video, because it brings another essential piece of this puzzle. And without it, the transformation remains incomplete. I'll see you there.